Welcome all to the House of Blockchain series by Prysm Group. I'm your host, Guido Molinari, Managing Partner at Prysm Group. Prysm Group is an economic and governance consulting firm. We provide clients with expertise in incentive design, token economics, and governance related to permission and permissionless blockchain. In this series, the House of Blockchain, we will be exploring the leading projects in the space through our house framework many of you might already be familiar with. The house framework shows the key components for blockchain economic design. It is my pleasure to welcome for today's episode Kim Chaturvedi, who is the Chief Business Development Officer at TomoChain. TomoChain is a scalable proof-of-stake blockchain. It relies on a system of 150 master nodes with proof-of-stake voting consensus that can support near zero fee and a 2-second transaction confirmation time. Security, stability, and chain finality are guaranteed via novel techniques such as double validation, staking via smart contracts, and true randomization processes. TomoChain supports all EVM-compatible smart contracts, protocols, and atomic cross-chain token transfers. TomoChain's mission is to be a leading force in building the Internet of Value and its infrastructure, working to create an alternative, scalable financial system which is secure, transparent, efficient, inclusive, and equitable for everyone. Welcome, Kim. How are you today?
Oh, thank you very much, Guido, for inviting me. I'm doing very well. Things are getting incredibly busy in our industry, especially now that Bitcoin is, I guess, it's peaked at, reached its all-time high and crossed it just slightly. So industry is getting very excited. Our work is just picking up like crazy. So I'm doing very well.
Really happy to hear that. Indeed, yeah, we sort of peaked again on the Bitcoin side. Now, I wanted to start this chat with you, talk about yourself, right? So you've been, at TomoChain for a while now, but you were not part of the founding team. You joined a little bit after, but while you had not been in founding team, you had been already involved with the project before becoming, in the summer of last year, the Chief Business Development Officer. How were you exposed to the project and what attracted you to this particular network?
Sure, yeah. So I was an early investor in TomoChain, back in 2018. Word about this Vietnamese project, trying to take on Ethereum, being the scalable blockchain, came in through social media and through a number of different people I was following. So I started to evaluate what TomoChain was all about. And the first thing I found that was quite striking was that the founder, Mr. Long Wong, this was actually his second project. He had been in the crypto space since 2013. He was the founder of NEM. And since then, he led that to its kind of its initial start. And then later on, he left and started exploring other areas of blockchain. And he was a very well-educated individual as well. So being a second startup in the blockchain space was quite interesting to me. So that's what got me interested at the beginning. Then I ended up realizing that the team itself was full of veterans from a variety of industries, particularly from finance, working in the banking sector. And so I realized this was not some kind of, university project of sorts. This was actually, it looked like they were trying to create a real business. Southeast Asia was one of those untapped markets, and I found that to be quite exciting too. So that's where I started my exploration. And I became an early investor in TomoChain. And throughout, I started becoming more involved in the community side of things. When we launched our public mainnet back in December of 2018, we're actually hitting our 2-year anniversary this month. I decided to participate by launching my own masternodes. Essentially, we have 150 masternodes. I decided to launch one of them and see what that entire process was like. And over the course of time, I just kept involving myself in the project, started talking more with the administration, team members, and eventually, in early 2019, an opportunity came up for this particular role. And my history has been in a variety of spaces, primarily in startups, in technology startups, in the gaming sector. I've been a management consultant. And so, and I got into blockchain in 2014 as an investor. So over that period of time, I gained a love for this space. And when that opportunity came up, I decided, hey, let's give this a shot. I know the project. I know the space, I know the industry, let's see what happens. And, our conversations went really well. And it didn't take very long to find a match. They were really looking for somebody who wasn't just doing business development, but could kind of provide a more holistic look into marketing, into the finance operation side and strategy. And these were all things I've had to do in the past. So it just became a very quick fit. I joined in just July 2019, and it's been a great ride for the last year and a half since I've been here full time.
Great. And yeah, I think it's rare to see a team member that really has covered sort of all the roles, right? Investor and node operator, and now, of course, full-time member of the team. So Ken, when we chatted before, you mentioned to me that, TomoChain, and of course, this already has come up in the talk, that, was built on two technical premises, right? So solving Ethereum issues of being a slow network with high transaction fee, but, remaining compatible to it at the same time. And your focus as a network, right, has not really been towards developers like Ethereum and, many of its competitors. What have you focused on instead, and why is that being the case?
Sure. So this again kind of goes back to, really focusing on blockchain as a business. We did an $8 million raise, 8.5 million back in 2018. And we're a small team compared to other projects like Ethereum, more recently like Polkadot, Tezos, and things like that, which raised a lot more. So really the focus was, how do we get the most out of the amount that we raised? How do we have longevity? How do we ensure the security of all the jobs for all the developers that are on our team, which is at this point 60 plus? So the idea was, if we have a limited amount of funds, where do we put it? And what we thought was, in terms of trying to reach adoption of public blockchain, we needed to go after businesses which already had an existing customer base and bring them on board. So that way, in nature, we're not necessarily just providing grants to individual developers, which I think is important, but we're actually providing access to commercial businesses, which will jumpstart into having transactions on the blockchain from the get-go. The vision really is to look at blockchain as a technology layer and purely as technology. It means that end users should be able to have access to it without necessarily knowing that they're using blockchain. That's really what mass adoption is all about. End users don't necessarily need to have to know that they're holding tokens, or they have to have tokens to get the value of a blockchain. And so our view was, with these commercial businesses, that's kind of how they were looking. They have an existing customer base, which is not blockchain related, but they can utilize blockchain anyway. So what we did was, we've brought on a number of pretty sizable businesses related to that. So one of which is a company called Bakur. They actually are a crypto business, but they were initially focusing on Ethereum. They are the largest, the owner of the largest Ethereum wallet in Japan, called HB Wallet. They were particularly a little frustrated with, essentially the gas fees, the slowness of it, and also the inability to access a direct team member. The advantage of decentralized projects is, well, no one member can control it. But at the same time, one of the problems when you don't have a core team is, who do you go to for the customer help, the customer service, when you're trying to build something? And that's something that we did offer. So they ended up bringing their entire ecosystem over to TomoChain. And that includes developing a social wallet, NFT marketplace, and they have some really exciting things coming out of Japan that I can't talk about right now, but that's one of the biggest businesses that's come to TomoChain. And at the same time, we started to focus on other businesses that are more in, say, the retail space. So we have a project that's going to be launching the next month, and what they're doing is, they essentially are a large corporate gifting company. And so what they're doing is, we're launching an app with them where they'll be able to offer their employees or employers a variety of options, and they can pay using stable coins, as well as, say, other cryptocurrencies. The people who are going to be buying, though, they won't know that it's actually USD Tether or anything else. They'll be paying as normal, but it'll be going through the crypto ecosystem, through Tether coins, through stable coins, in order to make those payments. And again, this is just kind of another example of what we're doing, where we're masking blockchain, but we have a commercial use case. So this is what we've basically been doing, targeting businesses with existing users and customers.
Thank you, Ken. And you mentioned the founder, Dr. Long Wang, and this is being his second project, which is very impressive. I was reading his bio, and also it came across as, we've worked with other projects that have a founder coming from computer science or software engineering, but Dr. Wong actually has a different type of PhD. And can you tell us about it? And do you think that has influenced sort of this more business focus that TomoChain clearly has had so far?
Absolutely. So Dr. Long Wong, he did his PhD in economics from University of Massachusetts Amherst, and really it was focusing on market cycles. How do businesses function in different market cycles? And so this, his interest has always been about finance. So TomoChain was launched not just to be another public blockchain, but the focus was really to be on decentralized finance. In our white paper, we've referred to having a mission towards creating a scalable technology for open finance. That's what we use as a term. And so the entire endeavor of what we've been building is around that, and it is around his vision for having a much more open financial ecosystem for the world, where these centralized entities, whether they're government agencies or the existing financial institutions that really control the flow of money from place to place, where they're not necessarily usurped, but there is another alternative way for people to do business, essentially, irrespective of the governments that are currently in power, and to enable people who may not have a banking solution, the unbanked, to have them get access to financial solutions that may normally not be available using blockchain technology, and again, technology that's invisible.
Thank you, Ken. And I think we recognize the importance of that mission. And now looking a little bit about how TomoChain works, there's a core blockchain, and then you have three protocols on it: TomoX, TomoZ, and TomoP. Can you briefly, because we don't have the time to go into too much technical detail, but explain what each protocol does and sort of what is the use case for having this free protocol built on the core blockchain?
Sure, absolutely. So these three protocols, they were part of the kind of the initial foundation of when we built the public blockchain, TomoChain. We had these three ideas in mind, and they're all layer 1 protocols. They're not layer 2, so they're built into the fabric of the blockchain. Now, the first one is TomoX. So TomoX stands for it basically stands for exchange. It's what we do with it is it allows for anyone to launch a truly permissionless, decentralized exchange right on top of TomoChain, and within just minutes. So we wanted to make it so that anyone could be their own exchange. Now, what we've done with this, though, it's a layer 1 protocol, meaning that all of the master nodes, which secure the TomoChain network, they also manage the order book for the exchanges. They manage the transactions directly. As a result of that, there's very little lag in trades. Basically, any trade can be done at the speed of our blockchain. So within 1 to 2 seconds, trades are completed. There's no gas fee for trading either. So people can trade freely like they would on a centralized exchange. They don't have to worry about paying gas. So this is all about, again, removing that friction. So what it's allowed is we have brought in a number of projects from different blockchains, including Ethereum, and they're able to trade on TomoDex, which is our specific instance of a DEX, TomoChain's DEX. And these users, they don't have to hold Tomo. They can trade their tokens freely. The only fees they pay are as you would on a centralized exchange, which is the 0.1% of the transaction of your trade. And from there, they can directly deposit and they can withdraw back into their original wallets. There is no custody of tokens. Users are always in custody of their own tokens. So that was the vision for that. And so right now we have about 12 different DEXs that are in various stages of launch. And what we have is all of the order books are actually collated across all the different DEXs. So it's a shared order book. So you can have a bid on one exchange and ask on another exchange. And as an order book-based DEX, we've also issued the ability to do order book-based lending. So users can basically put up collateral in Tomo, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and they can borrow USDT. And so we've tried to make it as easy as possible for people to do this. Again, no gas fees, and again, the shared order book makes it very easy. Second thing that we've launched is TomoZ. So TomoZ is perhaps is our first protocol that we launched, and it's been incredibly successful. What it really does is it allows anyone to issue a token, like you would have an ERC20 token on Ethereum. You can have a token on TomoChain. The difference here is that the token does not require native Tomo to pay gas fees when you're transacting. So if we issue the Guido token, then essentially what we can do is you would be able to send that token to anybody, and the gas fee would be paid in that token itself. You don't have to hold Tomo. And what this has enabled is the ability for people to transact quickly without having to think about the friction of, hey, I have one token and I have another token to deal with transaction fees. And so we have a number of real world examples of how this has been very successful. The first one is Coin98, which is a Vietnamese company. And what they did was they issued their own token using the TomoZ protocol. The token's called C98. And what they did was they issued it into their mobile application, which is focusing towards investors. They were able to scale up to 100,000 users within about 3 months. And where these users were earning the C98 token, they were using it as part of their in-app purchasing capability to buy services and redeem it for actual physical product. And none of them had to hold Tomo. They just needed the C98 token. So it made it very easy to scale. But I think that was the first real proof of what it means to remove that whole idea of a gas fee. Now, technically, the way this works is the issuer of a token basically places a small deposit of Tomo into, you can call it like a small bank, essentially. So the network actually is still running off of Tomo. So when a user sends that token, say the C98 token with the example Coin98, what happens is a small amount of that Tomo sitting in the bank is paid to our masternode network, and that way, the actual gas fee is paid, but the end user is removed from that experience entirely. And the token issuer, in this case again C98, can set what fee they want to charge in their token. They can set it at 0, or they can set it a larger number. So this allows, and that fee will then go to the token issuer. So it allows for a variety of different ways of utilizing this function, particularly if you think of it from a stablecoin perspective. It can allow, right now, USDT on TomoChain. You could set up any kind of an e-commerce app, like the one I was talking about earlier with the corporate gifting, where the money can be basically sent from party to party, and again, don't have to hold Tomo. So it really does enable a lot of real-world use cases that make a lot of sense. That removes that whole blockchain friction. And the final thing is TomoP, which stands for privacy. So TomoP is going to be launching in Q1 of next year, and we already are in testnet. What it does is it essentially allows for purely private transaction, purely private sends. So any token, will be starting with Tomo, will be able to be sent privately within 4 seconds from one wallet to another wallet. We'll be eventually enabling our other tokens, TRC21 tokens, are these TomoZ-enabled tokens, to be able to utilize that. That also means any wrap token on the TomoChain network, say, for example, that's being used on our DEX, Tomo DEX, can also utilize this functionality so they can send tokens privately. We're also going to be adding other additional functionalities to allow for this privacy function to play within dApps. So essentially think about the ability to do private staking, or to essentially have an equivalent to a PayPal issuing their own token, which is private. And their entire network would be able to then transact, again, privately with that token. But at the same time, we allow for regulatory compliance where there is access to a private view key. So that can be provided to, say, a regulatory authority if by chance they need to see what's actually happening under the hood. But this is one of those things that I think everyone has been looking for in terms of being able to transact without anyone to look directly into, hey, this is my bank account, this is what I'm paying for a particular good or service, why should everyone be able to see it? And that's kind of essentially what this is going to be doing, enabling that functionality and at the same time enabling it within applications themselves. So those are the 3 protocols that we have. And again, they're all layer 1, so it allows for a lot more flexibility in terms of what we can do, particularly removing gas fees and other friction when that comes to like layer 2 that we're kind of typically seeing on places like Ethereum.
Thank you, Ken. And yeah, especially on this, upcoming launch of Tomo P, I agree with you. One of the major issue, like we're strong believer in, sort of open permissionless blockchain, but many people are skeptical that they don't want to have everybody else see what they're doing. So how do you allow for privacy? And I think this is right on spot what you guys are working on. Now, you mentioned a lot of very interesting use cases, mostly on the sort of private sector side. But I've recently read that you guys have announced a project together with the Vietnam Ministry of Education regarding certifications on the blockchain. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What are the plans? What advantages you think the Ministry of Education is going to have by using your network?
Absolutely, yeah. This is an incredibly exciting piece of news that we launched, that we announced just a couple of weeks ago. So at this point, essentially, TomoChain is going to be adopted by the Vietnamese government, specifically in the education sector, the public blockchain itself. This is not a private chain. This is not some other chain. It is purely a public blockchain adoption by a central authority. So what we're doing here is, Vietnam has some 23 million students out of its 100 million population. And all of these students, they graduate with diplomas from high school. Some of them go on to college and do PhDs, other higher education, go to higher education platforms, institutions. But one of the biggest challenges is that it's a splintered, industry. So you have some 3, 4, 5,000 different institutes which say will all issue different types of diplomas. And one of the biggest challenges across the world is an industry called their diploma mills, where they basically churn out these fake diplomas. And so how do you prove that what you have earned is authentic, it's real, and it's verifiable? So what Vietnam is trying to do is they're really trying to move forward in integrating technology across their different industries. Here, with the Ministry of Education, which oversees all of the education in Vietnam across these thousands of institutes, all 23 million students, what they want to do is consolidate that industry, whereby there is a standard process for issuing diplomas that are verifiable by anybody. And so what that means is that when when a student has graduated, they have a diploma in hand, they want to apply for a job, the employer can do a check on their background, and within minutes, they'll be able to know if this individual actually earned the diploma from the university with the actual area of focus, if whether or not that's true or not. And they'll be able to do that by the system that we're building, which is what essentially it's doing. It's going to be a single web portal. And all of the institutes, all the universities around Vietnam will be issuing their diplomas digitally, and they will be uploading it to the system. What the system essentially will be doing is storing all of that data on the TomoChain public blockchain. From there, they'll be issuing a particular number or an ID to every graduate. That graduate can then utilize that number, share it with their employers or whoever basically needs to verify it. That individual will then log into the website, enter that information, that number, and they will get full access to this individual's diplomas or certifications that they've earned from the specific university. So no longer will you actually have to go and call up each university or institute that these people graduated from. You can just go to a single website service and access the information. So really we're doing two things. We're consolidating the entire education industry for all the certifications and diplomas. And the second thing is they're all going to be issued or stored, I should say, on the TomoChain public blockchain. And so that basically is focusing on the security of what blockchain provides. And it really is highlighting the credibility, I think, to not just to TomoChain, but to what public blockchain really means at a mass-wide scale globally, that it actually can be trusted and used to secure very particular documents, information that is treasured and something that you really wouldn't want to have forged, duplicated. And I think this is going to be the first real use case at a wide scale for what public blockchain can do, particularly when adopted by a central government like Vietnam.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I agree. This is really fascinating and groundbreaking news. As you know, we have seen many government efforts on the private side of blockchain, but not really anything to this scale on the public side. So really congratulations on that. That's a really great achievement. Now, moving up one layer in our house to the financing, right? You did mention the ICO in 2018. You did mention, of course, a different scale compared to larger projects. Uh, but I know that, and I know that you guys have been very conscious about how that funding has been used. But I know there are other revenue sources, right? You're not just relying on treasury management for the ongoing financing of your operation. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys have been doing so far?
Sure, absolutely. So, the first thing is after we raised our funds, I think the smartest decision that our team made was to tether. So essentially, rather than holding on to Bitcoin, Ethereum, or anything else they had received, they decided, let's put this into USD Tether. Let's ensure that, crypto is a very, challenging, volatile space. Let's make sure that we at least have the runway for the next few years. So they did that first. Second thing they did was they said, okay, you know what? This is a business operation, as I mentioned earlier, right? They thought of it as a business. So in order to sustain ourselves, we can't just rely on the treasury that we have. We need to figure out other ways in order to generate revenue. So what we did was we launched, and this is related to the Ministry of Education Training, project that we did. We launched an enterprise and services side of the business. So we have an office based out of Japan that's called TomoChain Japan, and we have a development center that's sitting right next to TomoChain headquarters, which is a joint venture as well. And what we do is we focus on doing services-based work for blockchain as well as and that includes enterprise. So we have done all kinds of things with various clients, and that includes everything from building exchanges to developing wallets to doing tokenomics and issuing tokens for projects. And then these various pilots, which is focusing on things like in the automation space, or sorry, the vehicle automotive space, doing traceability with food, and also projects in healthcare, pilot projects in healthcare. And so all of these different projects that we've done, I should say 75% of them are, revenue generating projects. So some examples I can give to you are there's an exchange, the first Mongolian exchange called AIS. We developed their exchange, developed their wallet, helped them with their tokenomics and their token itself. For a second project, there's a company called Orbit, which is launching a derivative-based exchange. We help them with issuing their token and helping them develop their exchange as well. Just last week, we closed a deal to develop a wallet for a major player in Romania. I can't give you too much information about that, but it's going to be pretty exciting with what they're doing. And so we developed a wallet for them. We're developing a wallet for them as well. On the enterprise side of things, like I had mentioned, out of Japan, we've developed pilots which will allow for hospitals, doctors, and patients to be able to share data with each other. We have a system which has been built for a company called Yucar Pak out of Japan, and the pilot basically was trying to track the life cycle of secondhand vehicles. So, when a person wants to purchase a car, they would know the entire history, the ownership of that vehicle, any kind of issues that they had when it comes to, that they had a replacement of parts, if there were accidents, police records, and things like that. So we were developing pilots along on that front as well. So yeah, so all of this really was geared towards ensuring that we could cover the costs of managing our team. And moving now into 2021, we're pretty much close to breaking even on that front in terms of being able to manage the entire team, bringing in revenue from new projects, and at the same time being able to continue to develop on the public blockchain side of things, which is where a big part of our passion is.
Excellent, Ken. And I think we have seen many projects struggling with not having to rely entirely on treasury management. So you guys really, this approach more focused on business than other protocol really sort of seems to be paying off, also in terms of the sustainability of the project. Now, moving up one more layer to sort of the incentives. And, I like, in your project, as you go on the TomoChain website, the first paper is about the economics, written, of course, by your founder, and there's a lot in there. But of course, there's a particular focus on the master nodes that run the system, and of course, you have been running one now for a while. So let's focus on that. So you mentioned, there's 150 of them. How do the incentives work for master nodes? Like how can you become one? Do you need to get voted? Do you need to stake anything? So what is the cost of running a node? What is the expected for profitability? Can you tell us a little bit about how the economics of the master nodes work?
Sure, absolutely. So TomoChain, we have a fixed number of master nodes that can secure the network, and that number is set at 150. This number was really determined just from doing various analyses of managing scalability to decentralization. The more nodes you have, the more decentralization you may have, but the lower the scalability. So it was a balance off of that, and 150 seemed to be the right number. So what we basically have set up is that we can have n number of master nodes, but only 150 can actually be actively securing the network. If we have any more than 150, the remainder of them are essentially sitting what we call a proposed state, where if something happens to an existing active master node, whether they resign essentially, then there's someone else to kind of come in to fill the gap. Now, to be a master node, setting it up is relatively straightforward. You need to have a cloud set up for a server, and there's a process for it. Once you're set up, the way to actually become a master node is you need to stake a certain amount of Tomo. So to be able to propose to be a master node, you need 50,000 Tomo. From there, to be in that top 150 set, it's really based off of how many votes you essentially have. So how much Tomo is actually staked on it. The top 150 master nodes with the largest number of Tomo, the largest amount of Tomo staked on it, which includes the master node operator and anyone else that basically votes on it, the top 150 will be active in producing blocks for the blockchain and will in turn receive rewards. Now, the way in which it works for TomoChain in terms of receiving rewards is for the first 2 years of the mainnet, there are going to be 4 million Tomo that will be allocated each year. So during that period of time, what we do is anyone who stakes on a master node, you basically can go, you can see our entire list of master nodes as a staker. You can choose which master node you want to vote on. You say, I want to stake on this particular master node. You stake on it a certain amount of Tomo. And essentially you start receiving rewards immediately. Every 30 minutes or so, which is roughly what we call an epoch, you receive rewards just for having staked. Master node operators obviously receive the largest amount of rewards. So there's an infrastructure reward, which is roughly 40% of the total amount that they earn. 50% is allocated to stakers, and roughly about 10% is allocated to an ecosystem fund that will be used by a governance council. And every master node earns the same number of total rewards. So it's divided equally across 150 master nodes. However, from there, it is proportionately divided up based on the number of votes, the amount staked on a master node. So the more Tomo that's staked on a master node, the more that the total amount that's rewarded has to be divided up. So that means that each vote actually will earn, say, less rewards if there are more votes on it. So essentially, we try to make sure every master node is equal in value, but the amount that you earn is proportionate to the number of votes that are on it. So that's essentially how the entire system works. We're going to be reaching our first halving in February of this year, which is going to be an interesting event. And then the next halving is going to be happening 3 years after that in 2024. So I think typically these are one of those bullish events, and it will be interesting to see kind of what happens. But yeah, that's essentially kind of how the setup works.
Thank you, Ken. And just to give our listeners sort of a flavor, do you have an estimate of how much it costs to run, to be a master node? Like, is it like for some networks, you have to have, a lot of servers and it becomes almost like a profession, right? And others are more geared towards, a more democratic set of users.
Sure. So, I mean, the cost of operating a masternode, my monthly costs are somewhere around $200, but there are people who can also have been doing it for like $80 a month. It depends on the kind of setup you want, which service you go with, but typically between $80 and $300 a month is what I've seen. So it's pretty economical. The returns themselves, especially now that we're heading into a better market, I'd probably say that, let's see, as a master operator, you're probably earning about maybe 1,500 or 1,250 Tomo a month. So at current prices, that's probably about $1,000 or so at the cost of expensing out, $80 to $200 a month. So if you just want to cash out every month, you're doing pretty well right now as a master operator in terms of returns.
Thank you, Kim. And just one clarification. Do the 150 masternodes, do they offer to people stake voting for them the same return, or do they have any saying in that?
Could you repeat that one more time for me?
Like is it proportional? Basically, as a masternode, I cannot alter those proportions that you mentioned and offer a higher return to stake or to sort of get more votes in a way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it is built into the fabric of the way in which the masternodes work. The rewards are defined, so master operators cannot alter them. The only way that I've seen master operators try to do this is more it's they have a verbal or a textual agreement with somebody. Hey, if you come and vote a certain amount of Tomo, I'll give you some extra rewards. They'll do things like that to attract rewards, but it doesn't work otherwise. You can't programmatically change anything.
Thank you. Yeah. So, there are still side payments. I think that's something there's no way to get around those. But no, it is very interesting, and thank you for that explanation. So we've been talking about Tomo a lot. This is of course your native token. And you did mention, and I think this is a fascinating aspect of a gasless system, and also the ability for people to create their own token and using sort of Tomo as this collateral. Can you tell us a little bit about the economics of Tomo? Like how much of the supply is already out? You said there's a halving coming, and is the remaining amount held by the company, or is there also a foundation? Sort of like how's the allocation of the Tomo at the moment?
Sure, of course. Thank you. So essentially what we're doing is we have a total supply of 100 million Tomo. From there, at this point, we have 76 million of that in circulation. So we're pretty close to kind of coming towards the tail end of that. The emissions rate right now is a total of 17 million Tomo that's going to be provided for the staking rewards. Of which we've gone through at this point, we'll be going through, I think, 8 million of that within these first 2 years since the TomoChain mainnet launched, and we have about 9 million to go. So 17 million on the staking reward side, which is roughly, which is about 17% of our total supply. The rest of it is about 15% is going to be the team and to the advisors. And that includes part of the amount that's going to be used for development. The token sale itself was about roughly 50% of the entire supply was the token sale. So we went from 50% now to 75% in circulation. And about 15% roughly is allocated for the governance council that's being worked on. So that will be used as an ecosystem fund for funding other developments based on what essentially the community or the master operators are looking for down the road.
Great, thank you, Kim. And you mentioned governance, and we like to say that's thinking about our house framework. That's the roof of the house. It sort of like holds everything together under it. So I know that so far TomoChain has been most of the decisions have been mostly taken by the company TomoChain Private Limited, and then implemented, of course, as we mentioned, by the 150 masternodes. But you guys are, experimenting with the community proposals through your recently launched multi-chain liquidity swapping product, Lua Swap, and its native token Lua. Can you tell me a little bit more about, what are the initial ideas around this? You mentioned just now, creating a governing council and allocating tokens to that. And, any concerns that you also might have. I mean, you mentioned earlier in our chat that, a decentralized system is something that we should aspire for, but of course, especially if you're working with corporates, they might want to still get a good level of customer service. So how do you balance, right? Going towards a more decentralized setting, but also keeping up, the sort of business focus that your project has had so far?
Great question. And governance has been something that we've been looking at for the last 2+ years in terms of, how is it that you can include community into, making decisions that are beneficial for the entire ecosystem. We've seen a number of different attempts at this with DAOs, and most recently with the launch of these various governance tokens, there have been new systems put in place to kind of to test this. When we kind of go back in history, one of the things I always end up thinking about is in the United States, the founding fathers of the United States, when they set up the ability for the people to elect their governors, to elect their president, what they really did was they allowed for people to vote. But at the end of the day, the people who actually placed the valid votes are part of the Electoral College. You are really voting for the delegates, telling them where you would ideally want them to vote. And at the end of the day, it's these people that make the final vote. And they theoretically could decide, even if their constituencies are voting one direction, they could, if they wanted to, vote a different direction. That's entirely on them. The system was built in because the founding fathers also didn't necessarily believe that that people could actually make those decisions in an educated way, and they wanted to protect against that, which is I found to be a very interesting philosophy. But that's kind of what they put this in, to protect that. When we come to decentralized ecosystems, what we're doing is we're trying to balance those who are thinking of the long-term benefit of the chain or of the system that's being developed. And how is it that you can then delegate part of that governance or the entire governance to a community of, say, investors, which are, they're looking to utilize the system, but they're also looking to earn returns. How do you balance long-term growth for an ecosystem versus, say, those who are looking for short-term profits and may not be thinking of long-term? And this is where some of that the tug of war has kind of started to came in early on, and now we're trying to figure out how do you actually solve that problem. And I think we've been starting to see some interesting initiatives being done by various parties in the space, where what they're doing is, there's a system that's built based off of a called Snapshot. We've seen SushiSwap using this as an example, and even LuaSwap, our product, our AMM, is also using this. And the idea is that you're able to put up proposals, and for those who hold your token, you allow them to essentially vote on these proposals. Initially, the idea is that these proposals come in from the major authority, which is developing the project. And over the course of time, the idea is then you allow for a certain group of delegated community members to start making proposals, and then allowing community to vote on those changes. And that's that's the approach we've been taking with LuaSwap. Right now, our governance structure, which is really what we're testing out, is to see, can we use this on TomoChain itself, is putting out proposals, seeing how people will vote on them, what their feedback is, and at the same time, looking at the kind of proposals that they're putting together themselves, and determining whether or not those should be put up for vote. So right now, it's really testing out, how does a decentralized governance structure work? We're putting our proposals out there, asking people to vote on them, but we're also seeing where it is that people really want to vote. What kinds of changes do they want in the LuaSwap system? So we started off by testing this just by saying, okay, can we get consensus around what projects we want to, say, list on LuaSwap? Then, hey, let's see what the community thinks about adjusting reward structures. on Lua swaps. We did proposals for that. Now what we've done is we've shifted it over for the community to determine which of our pools on Lua swap on our AMM should receive additional rewards. So we're testing that out. And the idea, hopefully moving forward, will be we'll be asking the community themselves to start putting up proposals, which will need perhaps a certain number of votes initially. So they'll need to be relatively large holders to put up proposals. They'll need to be sent through some kind of a committee to kind of vet that has all the information, relevant information. Is it there? Is it proper? Is it something that can feasibly be done from a technical perspective? And then allowing those to go up for votes as well. And it's going to be kind of a step-by-step process. And ideally, what we want is this structure to then be pushed out to the TomoChain community and allow TomoChain holders to be able to also vote on similar type of proposals, and then to be able to make their own proposals and eventually transition things over to having them run it entirely. But it really is kind of this step-by-step structure in terms of how do you slowly kind of let go and have the community start making more and more decisions for you. And that's always a bit of the challenge of how do we get there. And we always kind of look at sort of these history lessons from governance in general across countries and cities in terms of how they work, at the same time kind of studying exactly how they're working, within projects like Yearn.finance and, Curve and others, to see kind of what we can take from them and apply them to our own governance structure.
Thank you, Ken. And I think, it's also fascinating. I think about it often, especially given the election we just had here, that, we didn't vote directly for the president, right? And the question is like, how, looking at all this history lesson that we've had, what do you incorporate in the project as you try rightly so to push for more decentralization? Now this, has been a fascinating talk, and I think we've covered a lot. For our listener who might want to get involved with TomoChain, where can they get more information? Is there a phone number or, an email to contact anybody? What are the opportunities for people to get involved?
Absolutely. So obviously for information, TomoChain.com is a great place to start. In terms of being able to access our community and to get involved, we have a Telegram channel, which is pretty active. So that would be telegram.com would be /TomoChain. And we also have a forum, which is our primary go-to for kind of discussing kind of broader issues and even for customer support with our team. So that's forum.tomochain.com. And so basically Telegram and our forum are probably the best places to go to get involved and to kind of speak with the community, speak with the team, and kind of brainstorm and see what we can do together. So yeah, I definitely encourage anyone that's interested to try out both of these channels, and I'd love to see them there. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm in both of these places as well.
Fantastic, and we'll share all the links, in the description of the talk. Well, Kim, again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure having you, and for all the listeners, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for having me again. I really enjoyed this discussion. I think the kind of intellectual discussions that you have in this series, it's something that we really need more of. So I'm looking forward to kind of watching more of these as you produce them. And a huge congratulations on taking this approach to educating people about blockchain and kind of what it really means at the grander level, the grander scheme of things. So thank you as well.